Good afternoon. My name is Callie Williams, Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Arkansas Historic Preservation Program. Thank you for joining us for our virtual tour of Boyle Park in Little Rock, Arkansas. Boyle Park was listed in the National Register of Historic Places in 1995 as a historic district relating to the historic context titled The Civilian Conservation Corps in Arkansas, 1933 to 1942. Boyle Park, an approximately 230-acre tract of largely unimproved woodland, was donated to the city of Little Rock in 1929 by John F. Boyle. Eventually, the park would encompass 243 acres of land. The deed, authorizing the transfer of title to the city, stipulated that the land be used for, quote, recreational park purposes only and be named Boyle Park. And if these conditions ever failed to be met, the land would revert back to the heirs of the Boyle estate. At the time of its donation in 1929, Boyle Park was only the third public recreational park in the city of Little Rock. The first two public municipal parks in Little Rock were MacArthur Park and Alsop Park. The only other large park space in Little Rock was Fair Park, which was used for the state fairgrounds. Boyle Park continued to be largely unimproved until the mid-1930s, when the Civilian Conservation Corps arrived. There seems to be some uncertainty about when the actual construction began in Boyle Park, but sources reveal that it took place between 1933 and 1937. The Civilian Conservation Corps Company No. 3777 camped at nearby Fair Park and worked on several projects within Boyle Park, including building access roads, the construction of a caretaker's cabin, a water tower, pump house, garage facility, 2 pavilions, a spring house, restrooms, concession stand, a park entrance, signage, rock walls, culverts, a low water bridge, trash receptacles, picnic areas with fireplaces and tables, and several hiking trails. The CCC also constructed a dam on Rock Creek to form a small lake in the park. Today, Pavilion No. 3, which was constructed in the 1960s, and a play area are located along the shores of this small lake. The remaining CCC structures that contribute to the historic district include the caretaker's cabin and water tower, pump house, garage ruin. Both of these resources are located on the ridge overlooking the park in an area used by the City of Little Rock as a maintenance facility. The water tower and garage structures have been altered, and the caretaker's cabin retains much of its historic integrity with the exception of a small garage addition. Unfortunately, the cabin is inaccessible to the public. As of 2008, a Parks and Recreation employee used the cabin as a residence. The other contributing resource within the park includes the 2 pavilions, the low water bridge, the spring house, and 2 stone culverts. The 2 stone culverts are located down the walking trail south of Pavilion 2. Today, the park also includes a few modern maintenance sheds, modern pavilions, modern restrooms, most of which are not contributing to the district. For a time in the 1930s, the park was sometimes described as Boyle State Park. This may have been a generalization, as many of the CCC construction projects underway at the time were in areas that were considered state park land, while Boyle Park was a municipal park. There may have also been a time when the park fell generally under the administration of what would become the fledgling Arkansas State Park System in the late 1930s. It wasn't until 1937 that the Arkansas State Parks Commission was created and the state park system became a more formal state organization. John Francis Boyle Jr. was a prominent Little Rock businessman, and just like his father before him, he was a lifelong resident of Little Rock who had interest in banking, insurance, and real estate. He was born in Little Rock in 1874, and after completing his high school education, he started work for his father's insurance firm. He was the vice president of the W.B. Worthen Bank, president of the Boyle Farrell Land Company, which owned over 48,000 acres of land in central Arkansas in 1922, president of the Hawthorne Land Company, and president of the Boyle Realty Company, which owned the Boyle Building at Capitol and Main Streets in downtown Little Rock. When President Franklin Roosevelt took office in 1933, he faced many challenges with the country deep in the throes of the Great Depression. The average national income was less than half of what it had been 4 years before, with nearly 13 million Americans, or about 25% of the adult workforce unemployed, and banks failing at an alarming rate. Something had to be done quickly to remedy this situation, so Roosevelt initiated his New Deal programs. One of his best known and most successful federal relief programs was created by the Emergency Conservation Work Act, which was presented to Congress on March 21, 1933. The program was popularly known as the Civilian Conservation Corps, or the CCC. The dual purposes of the CCC were to provide outdoor employment to unemployed young men and accomplish badly needed work in the protection, improvement, and development of the country's natural resources. The CCC applicants had to be physically fit, unmarried young men between the age of 18 and 25. This age requirement was changed to 17 to 28 in 1935. Applicants had to have been unemployed for at least 6 months, and they had to represent families on public relief rolls and have dependents to which a proper allotment could be made. The monthly salary of a CCC enrollee was $30, and $25 had to be sent to a designated family member, leaving $5 for the enrollee to spend as he chose. Enrollees were also provided with living quarters, food, clothing, medical care, and educational opportunities. There was a small group of older CCC enrollees selected from veterans of World War I, and construction projects often called for the hiring of LEMs, or local experienced men, who were chosen to provide expertise in their particular field and to gain the acceptance of the local community where work was being done. Although the CCC provided labor for work projects in park areas, as well as forest lands, the greatest legacy left in Arkansas by the CCC was its work in the development of state and municipal parks. The National Park Service was established in 1916, but it was not until the 1920s that a concentrated effort was undertaken to establish state parks and forests for conservation and recreation purposes. Part of this push in the 1920s stems from the widespread use of the automobile for transportation. There was an increased demand for outdoor recreation. Interestingly, the creation of the Hot Springs Reservation in 1832 was one of the first steps taken by the federal government to preserve public land. Despite this early federal natural reservation, there was no formal state park system in Arkansas until 1937. Therefore, when the CCC began work in Arkansas in 1933, it made huge strides in the development of our parks and forest areas. By late 1933, CCC Company No. 1726 had been formed in East Missouri and sent to Little Rock. The company was stationed at Fair Park, now known as War Memorial Park in western Little Rock, where they were housed in buildings that had been used in previous years for the state fair. By December of 1933, roads in one of the pavilions at Boyle Park were under construction. In 1935, Company No. 3777, which had been created from remnants of earlier companies that had been stationed at Devil's Den State Park near West Fork, Arkansas, were transferred to Little Rock, where they continued work on Boyle Park until the fall of 1937, when work was considered mostly complete. Company No. 3777 was then transferred to Lake Catherine State Park to continue to work on new park facilities there. Pavilion No. 1 is a great example of a rustic-style picnic shelter, built according to the standards set forth by the National Park Service. You see, the rustic style of architecture traces its origins back to the landscape architecture movement, which integrated nature and the built environment, and the early 20th century designs of camp retreats in the Adirondack Mountains of New York, which were often blended into their wilderness surroundings through the use of natural materials. From the time the National Park Service was created in 1916, it made a strong commitment to design park facilities in a way that they would harmonize with the existing landscape. When the Emergency Conservation Work Act created the CCC in 1933, it made the Agriculture and Interior Departments responsible for organizing and supervising the work projects. The National Park Service is within the Department of the Interior, and the National Park Service was actually responsible for choosing new park projects, choosing the CCC campsites, and evaluating the progress of the projects. It was difficult for the National Park Service to supervise the architects at all of the CCC projects, so the Park Service developed a guide based on its regional office's best designs. This guide was originally published in 1938 by the National Park Service as a 3-volume set, but it was reprinted later as a bound volume and called Park and Recreation Structures by Albert H. Good. In this 1938 guide, Boyle Park is the only municipal park in Arkansas used as an example of rustic architecture. In fact, it's one of the few municipal parks included in the book, as the majority of the parks cited are state and national parks, including some in Arkansas. The author addresses the most basic park structures like entrances, railings, signage, waste receptacles, restrooms, etc., as well as large-scale projects like pavilions, bathhouses, museums, amphitheaters, cabins, and even interior furnishings. The book's overarching guideline is to build only what is necessary, pay attention to scale, use the appropriate local materials, and overall try to blend the construction into the natural landscape. In keeping with those guidelines, Pavilion 1 at Boyle Park features a broad gable roof, now covered with asphalt shingles, but originally covered with wood shakes, supported by flagstone piers at the four corners and vertical log posts with brackets on the sides and front. The gable ends are covered by vertical boards, and the rear wall of the pavilion is anchored by a large stone chimney with a fireplace on each side. The pavilion features its original post and beam log superstructure and exposed rafter tails. Pavilion 1 also boasts a flagstone floor and terrace area, and the terrace continues at the rear of the building, where it is accented by a curved terrace wall. The materials, coloring, and scale are appropriate to the surroundings, and the building is as open as possible to radiate sweetness and light as the guide encouraged. And it has a fireplace, which was considered a necessity. At Boyle Park, the income from pavilion rental fees and the concession stand were originally used to pay to maintain the park. The City of Little Rock's second annual report from 1946 stated that the end of World War II and the removal of the gasoline and tire restrictions resulted in record attendance in Boyle Park. During the last 4 months of the year, more than 8,000 people used the two pavilions alone. This 1946 report also states that additional electric lights were strung in the open picnic areas to maintain ample light in the evenings. During past research on the history of Boyle Park, a city parks and recreation employee told a story about how his family used to come to Boyle Park on hot summer evenings in the early 1950s. They lived in Little Rock but did not have air conditioning, so his parents would come to Boyle Park to play cards with their neighbors until it got cool enough to go home and go to bed. In recent years, the City of Little Rock has been awarded grants from the Arkansas Historic Preservation Program for restoration work for some of the rock paths around the exterior of Pavilion 1. Located near to Pavilion 1 is a low-water bridge. This sturdy low-water bridge was constructed here because the approach roads in nearby area are prone to flooding. It would make no sense to elevate the bridge above flood stage when the road and surrounding areas would be flooded regardless. Because the bridge was likely to be submerged by floodwaters quite frequently, it was constructed in a rugged design. The bridge itself is low to the ground and features low stone balustrades on either side. It is supported above the creek bed by short, squat stone piers. Near to the low-water bridge is a small dam that was designed to look natural and serve as stepping stones when the water is low and blend into the stream when the water is high. To the north of this small, naturalized rock dam is a larger CCC-built dam that creates the lake farther north in the park. Near to this lake is Pavilion number 3, that was built in the 1960s and includes a nearby playground area, restroom facilities, and paved walking paths near the lake. One interesting fact about Boyle Park is that it was often used early in its history for horseback riding. Horseback riding was extremely popular in the park during the 1940s and 50s, and there were several well-kept bridle paths throughout the park. The Fashion Stables, which was a private riding stable, was located off of 36th Street near to the park. By the early 1960s, riding had become less popular and the stables were gone. There used to be quite a bit of signage constructed by the CCC for the bridle paths throughout the park. Pavilion number 2 employs the same rustic design as Pavilion 1, except its foundation is slightly elevated and it's accessed by a small set of steps, and the rockwork on the center post and foundation is slightly different. The rocks are smaller here and are set in more regular courses than the rocks used on Pavilion 1. This pavilion was constructed after Pavilion 1, and in the area just to the south of Pavilion 2, there was also a kiddie's wading pool that was fed by a rock gutter coming from the spring house. The pool itself was surrounded by rocks quarried from Bear Mountain, which was northwest of Little Rock, possibly close to Pinnacle Mountain. This pool was filled in due to a fear of water contamination. The spring house is a hexagonal building supported by vertical log posts set atop a stone pier at each corner. The western entrance is wide and flanked by low stone walls that lead into the stone spring box at the bottom of the steps. The building features exposed, whittled rafter ends, and the roof, originally covered with wood shakes, is covered with asphalt shingles today. The author of the National Park Service guidebook really admired the spring house in Boyle Park, writing, quote, "If a rustic structure may ever properly be termed a temple, here is one. A veritable shrine for a woodland spring. This shelter seems in every detail beyond legitimate criticism. Roof texture, whittled rafter ends, character of stonework, all combine to render a structural symphony." End quote. One interesting fact about the spring house: in 1946, the city of Little Rock poured concrete over the floor of the spring house because the water was condemned, in effect turning the structure into another pavilion-type building. About 20 years ago, the city came in and jackhammered the concrete, finding the original rock beneath. They then had the original springhouse floor configuration reconstructed. Boyle Park retains a very good collection of rustic-style CCC structures, and the thickly wooded landscape remains much the same as it did in the 1930s. These structures continue to function as important elements of the park today. Thank you for joining us for our virtual tour today. More information on all of the sites listed in the National Register of Historic Places in Arkansas can be found on the Arkansas Historic Preservation Program's website at arkansaspreservation.com. You can also check out videos of our past tours on our YouTube channel under Arkansas Preservation. Our next virtual sandwiching and history tour will be of the St. Joseph's Orphanage in North Little Rock, Arkansas. This tour will take place as a virtual tour, premiering on our Facebook page on Friday, October 2nd at noon. Please check our Facebook page and our website at arkansaspreservation.com for the most up-to-date information on our tours and programs.